Yeah, exactly.
Nathan Shedroff. So Nathan is a professional strategist, another S, as well as a serial, everything I know is all these PMSs, serial entrepreneur, pioneer in the field of experience design, awesome, thank you, interaction design and information design. And he's currently creating new tools and models for new ventures of total value, beyond just economic and functional value. So he's the chair of the groundbreaking Design MBA program in design strategy at California College of the Arts in San Francisco. And these programs prepare the next generation of innovation leaders for a world that is, I love these adjectives,
Another F.
Profitable, sustainable, ethical, and truly meaningful. Yeah. So the programs unite the perspectives of systems thinking, design, integrative thinking, business models, sustainability, and one of my favorite words, generative leadership. So before academia, he was a pioneer in multi and online media. He co-founded Vivid Studios, which was an interactive media company and one of the first web services firms on the planet. So awesome claim to fame. So with that, I'm going to kick it off and introduce Nathan Shedroff. Welcome.
Okay.
Thanks for being here.
I got this one.
Oh,
yeah.
Need
I'm wired.
You're wired.
Hi, everyone. How you doing? I promise to end on time because I don't want to be the person that stands between you and pizza. And thank you for having me down here. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Logitech. I would love to, I know there's some folks online too, so I don't know if this will work for them, but I would love to, at least for the people in the room, get a little bit of understanding of like what you do here or what your background is, just so that I don't say the wrong things, or if I make fun of you, I will make fun of all of you together. How many have a design background, however you want to? Okay, great. They're all like sitting here in a couple stragglers. What about engineering, programming, coding? One? Okay, a couple. They're a little slower to admit it, I guess, with the designers room. Okay, so that's still not even, that's only not even by half people here. What about marketing? Great, okay. Ops, manufacturing, supply chain, a few. Let's see, well, what else? Finance? Right on, oh, there's a lot of people. Oh, that's great, okay. Who has not raised their hand? What am I missing here? Yes? Oh, consumer insights. Okay, great. I would have, great. Put that with marketing, so good. Awesome. Anyone else? Product what? Oh, I didn't even say that. Yeah, of course, product management, any other kind of product development, management? Okay. You're by yourself. well, welcome all. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to talk about creative leadership, and by creative leadership, I don't mean just, the creatives, which is a term I hate, because I think everyone is creative, and I think everyone should be creative in business, and we shouldn't limit it to one little group of people or one division of a company, et cetera, or any kind of organization. And through that, I'm going to be talking a lot about how we need to redefine values so that design and business work more hand in hand, and we can make better products and better services and better value for people, et cetera. I am interactive. I'm live here, so if you have a question, raise your hand. We'll deal with it now. You don't have to wait till the end. I will leave room for questions at the end. And if you don't agree with me, all the better. Let's get into it. So with that, let me tell you quickly, just really quickly about myself. I'm a designer by training. I have an industrial design background, actually car design, but I didn't go into the industry because, especially back then, it was so super siloed that nobody made good cars, at least not in the United States, because the front-end team doesn't talk to the back-end team, the inside team doesn't talk to the exterior team. Like, it was just not a holistic experience and wasn't as interesting to me. And I had other interests, so I went into something called information design, which back then was all in print. This is just before computers really hit the scene. And so I worked on a lot of heavy information products like catalogs and directories, et cetera. And that sort of set me up for a career in interaction design, or interface design as it was called at the time. And so I grew up professionally in interaction design, rode the CD, had a company, we rode the CD-ROM wave up and down, and then rode the web wave up and down, and I've probably made more websites than I care to remember. And if I never have to make another website, I'm perfectly fine. But also along the way, I worked on some weird other kinds of products like little e-car and e-tack in-car navigation systems and things for Magic Cap, if anyone has as much gray hair as I do and remembers that product and all sorts of things. And then along the way, I've been writing a lot of books, and I consult and speak a lot around design issues and increasingly business issues. And then, of course, I've done a lot of consulting in my life. So I've worked for a variety of companies in a consulting capacity. And then at the same time, because I'm a child of Silicon Valley, I have started my own companies at times, some more successful than others. And that's what I've done now. And so actually, Jessica, when you introduced me as the chair of the DMBA programs, I'm no longer chair. I've stepped down. So last month was my first month off. And now I've started my own company again because it was time to get into product. But I did start and run this program, or these two programs, for 9 years, and it was an awesome experience. As a designer, I sort of didn't know what I was getting into, but I went to business school, and I went to a very unusual business school because I don't think I would have felt super comfortable at the typical business school, and I had an awesome time. And it was kind of because I'd been speaking in the design world for a long time about how if designers want, and it's not just designers, but if developers want the kind of influence that they think that they deserve and they should have in their companies, we need to learn a little bit about business issues, business vocabulary. We can't expect the rest of our peers to come learn our world, so we had to should go learn their world. And someone kind of challenged me to drink my own Kool-Aid once, and the result was I went to business school, and I got an MBA, and it was a tremendous experience for me. It was absolutely eye-opening, a little bit terrifying, and really exhilarating. And so after that, the end of that, I ended up getting an opportunity to design my own business programs around, it's called the Design MBA, so obviously it's sort of design infused around design process and design thinking, but really it was an opportunity to take a clean slate, fresh sheet of paper, and think about what would the business program for the 21st century be, period, and build that out. And so that's been a great experience, but that's now over for me. The program lives on, and now I'm off in product land again, in startup land. Okay, that's me. What I'm here to talk about, really at the core of it, is the design world, and I'm going to use quotes there because that really just means development. It's not just design, and there's lots of kinds of design, and design research falls in there, and engineering can fall in there, and the business world, and there's quotes around that too, because the business world means a lot of things to different people. There's lots of different functions, as we saw, even just the people that are sitting here. But I'm going to use shorthand, so when I mean design, when I say design, I'm meaning that big mass, and when I say business, I'm meaning that big mass. There's still a pretty big gulf between these two worlds. In the Silicon Valley and in a couple other places in the world, these worlds are coming together a lot better, and it's more important to organizations of all kinds for these two worlds to merge and integrate and work better together. Outside of a few places in the world, they're still very much divided. And the division is really about culture. It's a little bit about tools, but it's mostly about culture. The way design and development works is often very different than the needs and the perspectives and the goals in the rest of the organization's business world. So that's really what I'm going to talk about. And I'm going to make fun of these differences because they are kind of really funny, and yet at the end of the day, when you have to get stuff done, sometimes they're incredibly infuriating, and sometimes they're even a little bit sad. But at the heart of it, the business world and the design world are different. We work differently, we look for different things, our goals are often different. A lot of what what bounds that is about culture. By the way, I'm just gonna remind you again, when I say design, I'm not just talking graphic design or interaction design, I'm talking engineering, sometimes architecture, basically front-end development. Product development, although sometimes that's service development and there's other things that get developed, right? Gonna have to use shorthand here. This is how, this is the stereotypes that each of these worlds sort of see the others as, right? We often see the business people as sort of shoot from the hip and make quick decisions and maybe not worry about the details. And often we're in the design side, because that's my background, we're often seen as a sort of smarmy, shallow, like as long as it looks good, we don't really care, and let's move on to the next thing. None of those are true, by the way, but really they're all both basically true. The derogatory way to refer to business people is usually bean counters, right? They only care about the quantitative and the numbers. And of course, we're called the creatives, which is as much a insult as it is a compliment, because everyone's creative, everyone should be creative. Some of the finance people should not be super creative in how they do their job. That's sort of why we had 2008. But on the whole, like I used to tell people when I had my company Vivid that the most creative person in our company was the CFO, because I had no idea how he was able to manage making payroll every 2 weeks. Like that was just a mystery to me, but he did, and I really appreciated it. At heart, humans are creative, but a lot of what we do in our jobs kind of cuts that out. And that's a real shame, because it's one of the skills that we can do that computers can't. Business people are trained to care about optimization. Designers, not so much. What we care about is imagination. We judge ourselves on our imagination. Business people, the metrics around their success are often about optimization. And these are very different worlds. They're both important worlds. You need optimizers in your company, but you also need imaginative people in your company too. And so a lot of what I'm talking about today is how do these two cultures work together so that they can make each other successful. And it's not easy. Business is all about trying to create as much certainty as possible. All the business tools that business people use are about optimizing and creating certainty. And often it's a false sense of certainty. So for instance, anytime you see the word plan, that's fiction. That's as fiction as any novel. A plan hasn't happened yet. It may be grounded in a lot of assessments and assumptions. It may be grounded with really good research. It is still fiction. In Silicon Valley, when a startup gets in front of a VC and shows that hockey puck diagram, that's fiction. But we all kind of act like it's more or less fact. It's going to happen. Report, fact. Hopefully that's fact. Like that's past. Plan, fiction, right? But we often don't use these terms or use these tools the same way, because the business world is all about getting rid of ambiguity and thriving in certainty. And the design world, the development world, is pretty much the opposite. We don't like certainty, because certainty is about old solutions, old ideas, and we're all about coming up with new solutions. We don't want to be certain what the answer is, because the new answers come out of the ambiguity. Well, you can see how that goes, right? You probably live how that goes. Minimal viable product is sort of the term of the day, at least in the startup world, about how to optimize within the business side. We're all about the experience and figuring out how to prototype the experience so that we can know what it's going to be like for customers, for instance, and how it works. Yes?
What is minimal viable product?
Well, it means a couple different things to different people. It originally meant, what's the minimal amount of investment that you need to get to market? But that's not how most people, in my experience, take it today. Now it's, what's the minimal amount of features do you need to get to market? And that's very different, because minimal amount of investment means how can you be as lean as possible, spend as little money as possible so that you can stay in the market longer if you have some ramp-up time. Minimal amount of features is very different. And minimal amount of features is sort of about making a shallow product, getting to market fast, the ideas you want to iterate quickly, but often it negates the understanding that your customers, our customers, they don't live in a minimal viable world. This is the problem that the Zune had. The Zune was an awesome MP3 player when Microsoft put it on the market. Well designed, great features, a couple features that even the iPad didn't have, but it was sort of a minimal viable MP3 player. And the problem is they were competing in a not minimal viable ecosystem of products and services. So product for product, it was pretty on par, but they missed the whole idea that they were competing in a different world. They were competing in an ecosystem. So they didn't have the minimal viable features. This is why we have to be careful about this stuff. Okay, great question though. So one of the things that we teach in the program is that there are more than two kinds of value. And in the business world, most MBA programs teach great ways of managing, optimizing, dealing with financial value. In fact, the word value in business school pretty much just equates to financial value. There's also functional value, and especially in the tech world, everyone in business gets this, right? Features and price, features and performance. And this is pretty much where the conversation ends in most product development, in most companies, tech companies especially, because features and price is all they know. That's all they've been taught, and that's all the tools measure. So it's no wonder that we get a lot of really great feature sets, and we get a lot of really good price points, and those products often still fail because they're missing a whole set of value that isn't in their business tools. I know this because I went to business school and I've seen the tools, I've used them. And that is that there's 3 other kinds of value. Now, to be fair, a lot of business people, especially academics, economists, for instance, they know there's something more, but they can't figure out how to measure it, how to quantify it. This is lifetime customer value. Don't take a photo of it, don't write it down, it's wrong, it will never be right, but it's part of this sort of quantitative approach to figuring out that big other fuzzy thing that they know exists because they see evidence of it, but they don't know how to measure because it gets super complex, right? Another way of saying this is brand value. And there's about 6 different standard ways of measuring brand out there in the world, which is to say there's no standard way of measuring brand out there in the world. But people are trying because they know there's something more out there that price and performance doesn't account for. We, as designers, as developers, we know this too because it's part of the things that we look at, especially in user research. So I'm here to tell you there's at least 3 other kinds of value here. It's what we teach in the program. There's emotional value, there's identity value, and there's meaningful value. And these work at different levels of human experience. And once we can sort of put these on the table, we can work these into the key performance indicators. We can work these into the goal metrics of a product. Now we've got the integration that we really need within, sort of the development world. Let me go back for a second. The only way value transfers between 2 entities, customer and company, friend and friend, family member and family member, like whatever the connection is between people, these kinds of values are always moving back and forth, not all 5 in all kinds of relationships, but the only way that you can trade value with someone is within the context of a relationship. No relationship, no value. Doesn't have to be even a super strong relationship, but the stronger the relationship, the more value you can derive out of it. This is why if you set your sights on lowest possible price, if you're Walmart, which is all about giving the best price, that's not bad, but you're only trading at 1 kind of value, basically, or 2. Functioning, people are buying something that's hopefully useful to them, they're giving you money for it. The moment someone can offer a better price than Walmart, they've lost that customer. They're off at another store buying it. It's not a great, strong place to create a relationship. And if you don't think relationship is important at all, well, you're not even playing the game. And relationship doesn't show up in most of the business tools. The only way a relationship can happen is in the context of an experience. No experience, no relationship. No relationship, no value. Not a strong relationship, not strong value. It's that simple. It really is that simple. But our sort of business dogma over the last 70 years has kind of erased it and made it really difficult to see now because we have really good tools to measure these kinds of value and really terrible tools to even bring these up in conversation. In fact, these usually get second shrift in strategy, in product development, meetings, etc. What this means is that everyone is in the relationship business, not just special companies being in the relationship business. Every business is in the relationship business. But I challenge any business, I'll challenge you at Logitech to show me where relationship is on the bottom line. Where is the constant measure of the quality of the relationship that a company or an organization is creating and maintaining with their customers? It's not there. The tools don't make room for it. And that's sort of the fundamental problem that businesses have these days, and it's the fundamental problem about how these 2 worlds work together. It also means that you're in the experience business. Because remember, you don't have if you're not paying attention to the experience, you're making terrible experiences. And if there's no experience, there's no relationship, there's no value. So everyone's in the experience business. And there was this great book, The Experience Economy, right around 2001, I believe, by Pine and Gilmore. You don't have to read the book now because it's all in this one diagram, basically. The point of the book was saying, as companies move from a commodity-based company or strategy to product-based, to service-based, to experience-based, everything goes up. Your costs go up, but your profit margin goes up, your customer loyalty goes up, and customer engagement goes up. Everything can get better as you move from one of these strategies to the next. But it did so with two problems. One, how they define experience, and two, within the framework that somehow these companies, like you could be a company that was commodity focused and make perfectly good money, which is true, but that you weren't, like this was an option. The fundamental issue in the book that they didn't get is that it's all experience, right? You call up a service company, let's just say Comcast, you're having an experience when you're on the phone with them, if you can get them on the phone, right? It's not universally known as a particularly great experience, but they're a service company. To Pine and Gilmore, they're not an experience company. If you're a product company, to Pine and Gilmore, they're not an experience company either. Everyone is in the experience business, because if you're not, you're sort of working your way out of business. All of the examples that Pine and Gilmore use in the book basically are events and places. Like Disneyland is a big example, or concerts are a big example in the book. Well, those are events. They're not just event experiences. Do you have a question? Okay, that's fine. So this is something that we have to remember. And the tough part here, probably not a lot of people are willing to disagree at this point in the day. The tough part here is these aren't part of the tools that measure metrics or measure success and performance within a company on the bottom line, in the finance department, in operations. This isn't being measured. So it's really easy to optimize this stuff out of the company, and lots of companies end up doing it. We have to figure out new ways to do that. So this idea that value is more than money and value is more than function is really critical to how we innovate products, how we create better customer experiences, et cetera. These 5 kinds of value are always there. We can see evidence of them, even though we don't have the best tools to measure them yet. And the idea, the sort of metaphor of the iceberg is a really apt one we've found. So most businesses and business people, business reports, see this piece of the value, and they're missing this piece. Often we know it's there. We kind of feel that it's there, but we don't know how to measure it, and so it's hidden value. But it turns out it's not only lucrative value, it's the majority of the value in business. So I'm going to give you an example. Before I get to the example, this is another way to look at this. The outer layers of relationship, the outer layers of connection that you make with a customer or an organization might make with a donor, et cetera, are the quantitative kinds. Performance, finance. The inner ones are where they get sort of sticky and difficult, but really interesting. So at the very furthest out layer, if you think of this as sort of onion skins, if you're going to buy a car, you're buying a new house, whatever, let's say it's a big ticket item, the first thing you might do is say, well, what are my needs? I need a car that seats 5 people, and I go to the, I want to be able to go to Tahoe whenever I feel like, even if I don't really go to Tahoe that often, right? They're functional needs, and so I might take all of my choices and narrow them down to a set based on functional needs. That's really smart. We look at that as rational decision making. The next set of questions I might ask myself are around financial needs, because I could have driven here in a Lamborghini, and I could have driven here in a Tesla, and I could have driven here in a Hyundai, or I could have taken BART. I almost did take BART. And those pretty much do the same things. They get me here, right? But they do so at very different price points, and not everyone is willing to pay anything or everything for everything. We have our things that we care about more financially and not, right? So again, very rational, easy to measure. These are the quantitative kinds of value and quantitative decision making. They're really easy to research too, because essentially everything comes out in numbers. That's awesome, right? But once you get one step more, further in, one step deeper, things get really weird, and they get wonderfully so, but maddeningly so for a lot of people who aren't used to dealing with a lot of ambiguity. So now with the car, I'm I'm having often an internal conversation that I may not even be consciously aware of. So it's not unusual for a man of my age to go into the car dealership looking for the family sedan that all my kids can, fit in and make sense financially, but drive out of the dealership with, you got it, the red convertible, right? Why is that happening? It's not that I'm an idiot. I'm a rational guy, right? It's that my emotional dialogue, my emotional needs, the emotional value of that decision overrided all my functional, rational, conscious decision making. Happens all the time. It's incredibly powerful, especially that emotional value can trump the other kinds of value, certainly the other shallow kinds of value. This we call irrational, but it's totally rational. I may not have been conscious or aware that I was going to respond, that maybe I needed to feel validated or virile or younger or more successful in my life. But the fact that that car made me feel those things ended up being worth a lot for me, such that I bought a different car and probably paid more, and my wife is going to kill me because there's not even room for the kids now at this point, let alone Tahoe, right? None of this makes sense, but it's perfectly rational once you understand that this played on my emotional needs, even if I wasn't aware of it. And every single salesperson in the world will validate this. They might not use this kind of terminology, but they already know that if it's a conversation that comes down to price, they've already lost it. There's no way they're going to compete. And maybe they can cut away some of the fat and get that sale. But if the conversation isn't happening here, they're at a huge disadvantage. And this is totally human. And we're only halfway through these 5 layers, right? This is the third layer. Once we get one more in, it's about identity. And again, none of this makes sense, that we surround ourselves with brands and align ourselves with brands and wear brands and construct our identities out of brands. But the reality is we feel comfortable aligning ourselves with some organizations and not so with others. I'm a Coke guy, not a Pepsi guy. I'm a Mac, I'm a PC, I'm a Linux, I'm a Android. Like, whatever it is, our identities are so important to us that this happens a lot. Happens for everyone, but it happens in different categories. And this trumps even emotions, because emotions last 30 to maybe 120 seconds. After that, emotion's over. You can be in a mood all day, but even at night, when you wake up the next morning, your mood resets itself. Identity is really stable. People don't change their identities very often, outside of maybe junior high, right? So if you can create a relationship, a connection with your customer or whoever at this level, it's not going to change very often, which also means some other organization can't come in and knock it out and replace you very easily. And this used to be the sort of domain of nationality or religion, lots of sort of global big events and organizations in our lives. Now it's brands, right? That's sort of the replacement. There's one level deeper here, and that we call meaning. And this is really more about worldview. This isn't about what my needs are. This is how I see the world and how I fit into the world. And this is most stable, because we don't change our worldview very often, even less than our identity. So if you can build a strategy for your products and services or for your whole company that is rooted at the deepest connection you can make with people, man, you're developing the most stable, and you'll see in a second, the most valuable, even financially, relationships that you can possibly create, which of course means you can derive the most value, even on a financial level, from those. So how much is it worth? These are the quantitative values, meaning these are really easy to measure because they're mostly based around numbers. These are the qualitative values. They're really hard to measure because they aren't based on numbers, and you can't research them by simple questionnaires. You have to get at them in really interesting ways. And I'm going to use the example of Instagram here just because we can get at the numbers once the company went public and once Facebook published their annual report that year. We can see the numbers. So Facebook was sold at the time, I think this was 3 years ago now, for $1.1 billion. And at the time, of course, everyone went, how is that possible for 7 people to create that amount of value? And that's just, it's overpaying. Now, of course, it looks like chump change after Airbnb and Uber and sort of everyone else. Can anyone tell me, or guess, just guess, what did the books say that the company was worth the day before the sale? 100 million. Anyone else? 100 million going once? 100 million going twice? Okay, you're very close. The book said it was worth $86 million. But part of that was that investors put 50 million in 7 days before the sale. So you know what was going on there, right? Like, oh, we don't know anything about a sale. $50 million, right? So it was essentially a $36 million company. Good deal, by the way, if you could get it. Well, okay, even the designers amongst us, we can do this math, right? What's left over, right? A little over $1 billion. So the day before the sale, everything that we trust about financial reporting says the company's an $86 million company. The day after the sale, it's a $1.1 billion company. Where did the extra billion come from? And every entrepreneur, every investor, every VC, every startup company, they're trying to build this, right? That other $1 billion, that extra billion, and it's more in some companies even now, that was the value of relationship. They had created, whether it was defensible or not, some would say it was, which is why they got picked up for that amount of money, defensible relationships, and that's how much the market, or at least Facebook, valued defensible relationships at. But they weren't on the spreadsheet anywhere. They weren't in the balance sheet or the books of the company. In fact, in the company, the finance people can hopefully back me up on this. There's a cell, there's a slot in the balance sheet for what you do with this extra $1 billion, and it's called goodwill. So when you're accounting, everything has to balance. Got this extra $1 billion, what are you going to do with it? You shove it into goodwill. And if you look at statements, financial statements for companies on their annual reports, you see goodwill all the time. When a company is sold, or when a company is acquired, or when it goes public, you see often, if it's a healthy company, a huge jump in goodwill, because that's the first time this value can be recorded. It's the first time you can put a measure to it. Well, that's great. So everyone's trying to do this. Maybe they don't think of it this way. That's fine. But my point is, all of our business tools are really good at managing this, the quantitative value. And they're really bad at managing and building this. And if we're in business to make this kind of value, which one of these is the bigger number and by how much? This, right? This is what you really want. Even optimizing, certainty-seeking business people want this. If we want to create this kind of value, we need entirely new tools, because our tools are optimizing this out in favor of what's easy to measure, which is this. And I think that's at the heart of this uneasy relationship between the design side and the business side. Both trying to accomplish the same thing, which is to create a lot of premium value, is another way to say this, qualitative value, but using completely different tools to do it. Okay, book value versus goodwill, quantitative versus qualitative. And that defines most of these cultures. Cultures that optimize the quantitative versus cultures that optimize the qualitative. Ultimately, you have to have both. You can't run a company without both. Not that's going to be successful and sustainable and whatnot. We have to figure out how to bring these two worlds together. Now, part of it means that we have to get rid of some of the myths of business. And there are a ton of them. Go to business school, and it's astounding the myths that have been built up in the quote-unquote business world, right? Like, the numbers will tell the story, or that the numbers are the story, and they're not. I'm on the board of a company, and I remember this vivid moment when I couldn't figure out what the CEO was trying to say when, like, all the balance sheets are going by for each studio and each division, and it wasn't telling me anything I needed to know. And finally, thank God, one of the other board members said, John, stop. Give us 2 sentences on each division. What's going on? Oh, blah, 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 blah. We got it. We got the story. The numbers were a really important part of telling part of that story, of bolstering that story, but they weren't the story. And a lot of people in business are making the mistake that the numbers are the story. They're not, because they only tell a little bit of it. But to be fair, we in the development side, the design side, we have our own myths that we have to give up, because the work doesn't speak for itself, and it never has. And design isn't just focused on customers all the time. Sometimes it's focused on design competitions. And those are great as long as their goals are in line. So once we are prepared to get rid of our own mythologies, we can come together and be more successful working together. I've talked about value. I'm going to move forward quickly here. A better way to talk about this and think about this is total value. If value in the business world pretty much just means functional value and financial value, which pretty much means financial value, then we need to change the conversation to be total value, qualitative plus quantitative. We need to build new tools that measure relationship, because it turns out that's the only thing that really matters. We need to build in ways of making decisions that honor the experience and create better experiences, because that's the only place we're going to get better relationships, which is the only place we're going to derive this kind of value. And if you care about innovation, it's got to be all of this. It can't just be some. Oh, sorry. Okay, so what does that mean for an organization that says, okay, we get it, we want to be creative. We want everyone to be creative. What often happens in the innovation world is this. That's where innovation lies, product development. If you're lucky, sometimes it'll live up here in like sort of the director of operations. It gets really good when the person overseeing the metrics of the success of those roles, those jobs, those divisions are measuring them based on what those innovative goals are. That's certainly better than when one group is told they're responsible and maybe their metrics don't even back up the goals that they've been given. There's a lot of ways that companies do this. Sometimes innovation lives in marketing, which is to say it's just sort of this kind of weird greenwashing about newness. That's not really helpful either. It doesn't really matter how many people are connected to the customers if the entire organization isn't like developing new processes and metrics for success around this. Because innovation only really starts happening when everyone is involved. Especially HR. Who do you think hires the innovative people? And if they don't know what to look for, like I have to tell my students, okay, your game to get a job here is to make it through the HR pipeline so that you can meet with the person who will actually make the decision based and you would actually work with. But the HR people don't know that you can be both a strategist and a designer at the same time. So you have to choose one and show up differently so that you can get to that meeting where you can show up as a whole person and say, I can do both of these things. That's the reality these days. This is what a truly creative or innovative company looks like. Everyone is given the tools, the goals, and the metrics to be judged on the efforts that they do to be innovative, because innovation can happen all over. It's not just about new products or new services. It's about new processes. It's about ways of changing, not just optimizing the supply chain or operations. It's about the legal team that basically doesn't, which is somewhere here, I think, isn't it? Did I leave it all? Yeah, legal, right there. Lawyers are trained to say no, because they're trained to reduce risk. And let's face it, anything you do is risky. So lawyers sometimes are the biggest impediments in an organization to innovation, because they're doing their job, which is to minimize risk. And you don't get innovation without risk. So every part of the organization has a role to play if innovation is truly going to be important, right? And I'm going to use Archer here because it's Archer. I'm not going to, I'll give all these slides out, by the way. I'll give them to Jessica, so I'm not going to read them all. But every part of the organization has things that they can do to support innovation, to support creativity, to change how they do things. And it's not just the usual suspects like R&D and product development. There's things that finance can do. Already we need new finance tools that round out the conversation. HR is sometimes the last to know and last to be engaged with innovation or creative efforts, and they're the most influential because they're developing the reward structures for how people do their jobs. In fact, there's this really great book, oh, maybe it's coming up. I can't see my slides. Let's see if it's coming up in a second. Oh, I don't have a lot of time, so let me just say this. I won't run through all the slides. every company has a different culture towards innovation, and that's okay. Companies shouldn't be all the same. And our research shows that there's about 5 different kinds of cultures that are common within organizations. The trick isn't for everyone to be dynamic innovators. The trick is to figure out what kind of innovation culture your company has and use it to your advantage. Because there's a lot of companies that they're just not innovative. They're never going to be innovative. They're going to have to buy all their innovations, meaning they're going to have to buy other companies or technologies. That's okay, as long as they know it and they're not trying to be dynamic innovators, because it's not going to work for it. More important to know what type you are than to try to be a type that you're not. Let me see if, okay. Running out of time here. I don't want to make it sound like it's quantitative versus qualitative. In reality, it often feels that way. Working day-to-day in business, you often feel like you're the only one advocating for this on either side, and the other folks just don't understand you. The reality is that it has to be both. We have to figure out how to honor the quantitative when it's appropriate and the qualitative when it's appropriate, because neither is right on its own. But there are times when the qualitative decisions should take precedence, and there are times when the quantitative decisions are going to be more important. And at least if we can have that kind of dialogue, we can sort of work better together. This is the kinds of things that creative leadership needs to function or needs to focus on. We need to nurture creativity. We need to nurture innovation everywhere. Everyone should feel like they're part of the conversation or could be a part of the conversation. Not that everyone should be part of the decision. Decisions have to be made at some point, and those should be made by experts. But why shouldn't people be able to say, you know what, something doesn't feel right about that to me? Or I had this experience and I don't think I'm the only one, or I can prove I'm not the only one. And this is where we're going in our world. This is the book I was going to mention. This is an awesome book. You don't necessarily have to go read it unless this is really important to you. But Jean Litka and her co-authors, they went to the Fortune 500 companies that were known for being really good at innovation, because they knew that innovating inside a big company is very different than innovating in a startup. And so they interviewed the people within those companies that were recognized as being successful innovators. What did they find? That all the things that they had to do to be successful in those companies were fireable offenses. They hid budget. They didn't stop working on things when projects were canceled. They lied to their managers and to their leaders about progress because they knew it wasn't the right time to disclose where the product was yet, or to share it, or to show it, right? That's how most companies, that's the reality of innovation within and creativity within most companies, and that's just sad. That's why everyone has to get involved and be a part of an innovation culture or a creative culture. This is a really great book. If you want to know about sort of creative leadership skills for the 21st century, Christopher and Maria created this awesome book. It's super readable. I highly recommend it. Certainly get one for the office library. There are specific tools out there. The best tools I ever learned in business school was a set of skills called generative communication, generative leadership. It comes from a history of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, but it's been proven actually right here in the Bay Area as a better way of helping people communicate clearly so that they can collaborate better, so that meetings can go down to 5 and 10 minutes rather than 1 hour. Because when you get really smart about the language you use and you share within your teams, first of all, the teams become highly functional as opposed to just groups. And second of all, people know when things aren't clear and when they're not going to make good on a promise, or when they've been made an offer that they want to counteroffer because they don't want to accept that offer. Like, it becomes really clear when these things happen. So there's a language around this. This is super helpful. Unfortunately, the most valuable stuff I ever learned in business school, I cannot really recommend any place for you to get this information without taking a workshop, because this is the only book I've ever found that has this information in it, and it is not highly readable. It is a really hard book to get through. Now, I will say, I dog-eared every other page. It is chock full of really good information. But I had taken a class in this, and I had trouble getting through this book. So it's really hard for me to recommend it. But I will say this is the most important stuff that I ever learned in business school. And it's helped me, it'll help me for the rest of my life. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of resources yet. And I know that's like dangling chocolate in front of you and going, sorry, but that's where we're at because we still have to make all these tools. Business model canvas who's seen the business model canvas? Anyone? This is revolutionizing business schools, and it's starting to revolutionize companies. This is a designerly approach to creating a business model. And up until this tool, designers were not involved with business models. But this is revolutionizing everything because it's making it really easy to construct a custom business model for an organization in its markets, when the answer to business model before was, oh, you're in this industry, there's 3 predominant business models, choose one. Now we're customizing business models to fit new circumstances and to fit organizations personally. That's a huge advancement. And these green areas, that's customer, that's design, that's relationship and experience. So that's about 1/3 of the entire business model already makes room for this. So this is one of those tools that's helping companies innovate and helping customers get better experiences as a result. We have tools like this, which is called the Waveline. We're going through Zoom. Okay, that's why it's jumping around. This is a tool for designing relationships over time. It's called the Waveline. My whole new book is about it. This is one of the tools for creating a business strategy around core meanings, meaning the deepest connection you can create with people. So we're starting to build these tools. We're starting to make them available, but we're really at the beginning, and we're about 70 years behind the financial and accounting tools. So we got a little ways to go. In fact, if you want to build new models and new tools, jump in because we need them. New tools like the integrated bottom line, which is a better version of triple bottom line, if you've ever heard of that, which is trying to put in social and ecological impacts into business decisions. Those are coming online. Ultimately, to do all this right, this is what new companies have to deal with. And that's why we created the program, what we did, because we need new ways for these different tools and these different processes and different perspectives to work together. So with that, I'm going to say thank you. And you can't be creative unless you can't be innovative unless you're creative. And it's not easy to be creative, especially in business, because the tools are kind of dead set against it right now, and we need to flip that over. So I've got about 7 minutes, I think, for Q&A, and I'm happy to get into it with you guys if you so feel. But I can smell the pizza too. Sorry, Washington and Irvine, but you probably have your own lunches there. So if you want to go right to eating, I'm fine with that too. Yes.
Sorry, you mentioned that you did a workshop on effective communication based on the book in the latest way.
Yep.
What was that workshop on?
Oh, okay. So I took an entire class, a semester class. So the question was, I mentioned workshops in effective communication and generative communication or generative leadership. So I took an entire semester class of it, which was awesome. Because a lot of this stuff you can't even if it were a well-written book that was easy to read, like it's a book. This is about personal interaction. You have to enact it. You have to practice it. You can't just sort of read about it and get it. So I was lucky enough to get an entire class of it. And then we do that in my program. There's a whole class around that. But the man who taught me is one of the co-authors of that book, Bob Dunham. He lives in Denver or right around Denver, and he has workshops. He has them all over the country. So if you go to, just search Robert Dunham, I think it's Generative Leadership Institute or something like that, and he gives those workshops, which is going to be the best way to learn this stuff anyway. But that's the only other resource I know about how to get that. Robert Dunham. Yeah, exactly, or Bob Dunham, but you'll find him probably on Robert. Yeah, exactly. Other questions? Going once, going twice. Okay, thank you very much, and let's eat pizza.